I always knew my mother was Jewish. My grandmother had fled from France, having been raped, bearing my mother, and she hid her Jewish heritage, changed her name. It was totally hidden.
Welcome back to For Honour's Sake and my interview with Chelsea Pensioner Barrie Davey. If you haven't already, you can catch part 1 in the previous episode, but for now, let's jump back in with Barrie Davey, part 2.
So you got to see quite a lot of Great Britain, or certainly some corners of it, but what came next meant you got to see quite a bit of the world.
Now my brother and sister, it's always back to my brother and sister, always. Had somehow or other realised that I wanted to go somewhere else. And I was put up in a hostel. So back in those days, there were hostels for boys and girls, but obviously not mixed, in Chiswick, a place called St Christopher's. And while I was waiting for a position as an apprentice or my next stage in life, so I was being led by my brother and sister, and they must have put 2 and 2 together, and I was pretty obvious. My other brother had come home from being at sea on HMS Indomitable, and they put me into a sea school, the PWSDS, the Prince of Wales Sea Training School in Dover, where I did sea training, flew through it. I've now something I like. Something I'm good at,
Great.
Not splices, rigging, up the mast, down the mast, rowing. So they found, after you passed out, the better, more qualified boys got the better class of merchant ship, and it's like Cunard, well-known company, okay. Portline was a fantastic company. So I was earmarked for Portline. Joined my first ship in KG5 dock.
And what sort of role was that?
As a deck boy. So as a deck boy, and you work your way out, deck boy, junior order seaman, senior order seaman, EDH, UDH, blah, blah, blah. Up you go. Joined the ship and the men. My first brush with grown men, swearing, smoking, and they were all Scotsmen. Portline employ Scotsmen. Quite a home with Scots, as I said, good reason to be. So we then sailed. Little did I know that this television broadcasting unit was down in number 2 hold.
So this was the unit that you were taking to Melbourne for the BBC or one of the public broadcasters? The Australian Broadcasting Company itself for the Melbourne Olympic in 1956.
Correct. At that time, they had no television. They got coloured television, pretty obvious. They'd got no television broadcasting unit at all. So we were taking the first. And that was down in number 2 hold. And we'd taken this damn thing. It was always in the way. We wanted to get the cargo further down. Not, I say we, the dockers, ship's company. I was just a deck boy, so I obviously did as I was told. In actual fact, I was Peggy. Now, this is an interesting thing. The role of Peggy on board ship is the chap with the wooden leg who can't climb a mast and is virtually unable to carry out his role as an able-bodied seaman. Mm-hmm. So because of the wooden leg, he's called Peggy, not right. Peggy as in girl's name. That changed with the loss of sail and the loss of men going to sea with a wooden leg. So now the job of Peggy is the youngest man on the ship. So it was my job to look after the men, get all their food from the galley, take it in, lay the table, wait on them, clean the bathrooms, the heads, as you call them, or as we call them. And so then I'd do work on deck in the afternoon. So get my seamanship training in the afternoon. So this ABC broadcasting unit, I've got a photograph of that. Perhaps I'll show it to you. Was in the way. And we'd taken it out every port we went to. We'd taken this damn thing out, put it on the quay, and got the other cargo that was below it, and put it back afterwards. When we got to Melbourne, the press came down and we weren't allowed to touch it. You know, it was, and they put straw around it and protected it. You know, the damn thing had been out more than once on the way down there. I got to know one or two people in the theatrical trade, and got lent a house to. By now, I'm taking the local girls out, so I got.
Is it Melbourne by now, or
in Melbourne? Yeah. So we left Melbourne. The strange thing is, and I have to tell this tale because it's typical Aussies of the time. They got black and white, they got television sets in the shop windows. I suppose 9 inches to a foot screen, you know, little tiny things. And there's no picture. So the shop owner would put a cardboard cutout of the king and queen, and he'd have a fishing line. And if he saw somebody looking at the television, the blank television set, he'd move this. I'm not sure, honestly. So the king and queen would sort of go like this. Then when they actually got a broadcasting unit up and running, the Aussies would bring their furniture, their couch, their settee, they'd bring it out the house, wheel it in front of the shop that's got this television working, and they sit outside on the pavement. You know? And I tell the Aussies this that I meet today, and they also had pubs closed at 6 o'clock in the evening, and there was a big rush to get beer in flagons and go round to somebody's house where there was a party going, and you all threw money in the kitty. Australia in those days, another big thing about Australia was that on a Saturday and Sunday, the docks wouldn't work. They might work Saturday, depends on whether you're loading frozen goods. If you're loading frozen stuff, you'd work because you want to get that down below. Anything that's mechanical or not frozen, then you could. So Sunday definitely didn't work. And all the people from Outback, and I mean real Outback, would get in their car, drive down to the docks, walk along the dockside, because docks were open to everybody. They weren't locked up like they are today. And they all registered in London. Anybody from Ipswich or anybody from Sheffield, or you know, because that's where they come from. They've been
still have family there, and all that.
Yeah, then they'd start to inquire about what had happened back home. It was their only way of getting news. There were no international broadcasting.
Sure,
they got the news from
for them. Yeah,
the sailors, and you get invited back to their place. I can remember being invited back to a place in the outback, sheep farm, and they put on a meal. I mean, I wanted to jump ship. I'd have stayed there. I think I fell in love with the daughter as well. But how am I going to get back? And the chap said, well, he said, borrow the motorbike. He said, we'll come and pick it up next week. So I borrowed this Triumph, the little tiny Triumph, Triumph, the smallest Triumph, 200cc, whatever. Like that, yeah. So I borrowed this motorbike, got it back to the ship, somehow got it up the gangway, 2 o'clock in the morning, got no idea. Of course, there's a big inquiry in the morning, bloody bike is this? And the mate came down and we had to offload it, and this chap came and picked it up. But life was full of fun, you know, there was plenty of things to do. But this business of coming down to get the news from back in Blighty And that was the way they did it.
Absolutely.
That was the way they did it.
So the Royal Army Veterinary Corps began as the Army Veterinary Service in 1796 in response to concerns about the conditions for horses in the military. It was granted its royal prefix in 1918 in recognition of its vital role in World War I. And its main role since World War II has been the training, care and use of military working dogs, providing service in, amongst other conflicts, Malaya, Northern Ireland, Bosnia, Iraq and Afghanistan. Barry, you joined it in the early 60s, I think.
Well, after I've been in the RAF.
Oh, right. So the RAF was first.
I told you, it'd take a long time. Merchant Navy got a bit stale. So I joined the fishing fleet. I was up in Iceland, Bear Island, White Sea. Trawling is cold. Trawling is hard. And you'd think it was Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales. So I signed on some big ships, big trawlers, earned good money, and decided that forces was really the life. I've got to get in the forces. And because Dad, as I said right on the beginning, Dad was Royal Flying Corps, and he would have been in the Royal Air Force, I decided to join the Royal Air Force. One day, walked in, signed on, Queen's Shilling, ended up at RAF Bridge North, did the basic training, and as it happened, our unit, our B Squadron, we were just finishing our basic training when King Haile Selassie came over to Great Britain. So we were asked to go and line the route for Haile Selassie. This is the first time the RAF had ever lined the route in the Mall. And because we just finished our basic training, and I have to say, I'm sorry lads, all you Army chaps out there, but the RAF basic training was a lot harder than the Army. Maybe because I did it first, and the Army was easier then. But we were shit hot. We were immaculate, and we lined the route, and I think Haile Selassie, I know he bought a number of Vulcans, and he apparently used to fly them like Spitfires, and he was a bit lovely.
Fly them himself or have the
a crew of, what does a Vulcan take, 12, I think, something like that. I don't know, I'm guessing, but a great number. So I did the route lining, and can anybody row? We were in the we'd finished the basic training course, we're just going in to our trades, and the RAF has a completely different way of selecting men for their trade. And I was down to be airframe mech, which is quite a high trade. But we're all sitting in the hall. Can anybody row? And don't put your hand up, don't volunteer, but up went my hand. Now, by now, I'd rowed when I was at St. Christopher's, this is why I have to go back and keep jumping backwards and forwards. When I was at St. Christopher's, I rowed for Quinton Rowing Club, which is where the Oxford and Cambridge keep their boats at the end of the race. I'd also rowed for Imperial University, coxed, I should say, for them. I'd coxed, rowed and coached for the National Dock Labour Board in Grimsby. So I'm now in the Air Force. Can anybody row? Who are you? And I never did a stroke of work in the Air Force other than rowing. That's all I did, and I loved every second.
Wonderful.
A squadron leader came up one day and he said, I've been looking at your records. You want to work with animals? Yes, sir. He said, well, why didn't you join the veterinary corps? Didn't know there was such a thing. No, I'm happy where I am. But you haven't got any rank. I said, well, no, I don't want, we'll send you on a trade course. So I went down on the gravel bashers course, which is normally about 3 months, 6 months. 3 days later, I came back, SAC, piece of cake, walked over it. So I then got a discharge from the Air Force on my word of honour that I would join the Veterinary Corps. And he said, he said, well, look, there's the Veterinary Corps. That's what it's all about. That's what it does. Sorry, table. Why didn't you join the Veterinary Corps? So, yeah.
Yeah, and that desire to work with animals, I guess, went back to your farming school days.
Well, not
and
just
country
that.
days.
Yeah, not just that. I'd had 8 donkeys on the sands at Cleethorpes. I'd own 8 donkeys. So I was country life, let me loose in the country. I absolutely detest London. If they could move this place to the Outer Hebrides, nothing would please me more. It upsets me. London upsets me as a place. Not the hospital, London.
No. Yeah.
So I left the RAF. I can't remember if I did anything between the two, but it was so close.
Was the direct transfer probably?
Yeah. I went down and signed the dotted line for the Royal Army Veterinary Corps, only to be thrown back into another lot of basic training. I'd just come out of one lot. I was from a military school. Come on, I know my left from my right. This time I'm doing it with the Sherwood Foresters.
Right.
Wearing a Veterinary Corps cap badge. Because the Veterinary Corps has so few applicants, recruits, in my day, 103 officers and men throughout the world. 3 in Singapore, 4 in Cyprus. By the time you get to Melton Mulberry, you've got 5 men and you've got to do everything. Haymaking, everything.
Sure.
Looking after the dogs, the horses. So I'm wearing a Royal Army Veterinary Corps cap badge. In actual fact, there's 2 of us. Johnny Warne, never forget the guy's name, never met him since, and myself, wearing a Veterinary Corps cap badge. Basic training, piece of cake. To me, infantry, nothing. I've done it all before. We've now transferring from Leicester, Glenparva Barracks, where we had to then come up to Melton Mulberry. By the time we got up to Melton, it was dark. So I can only assume it was autumn, winter, and it was dark. And the 2 of us are walking along together, wondering about what it's like to be a dog handler, dog trainer. Johnny Warne was a shepherd. He'd worked with sheep, so very much similar to myself.
Kindred spirits.
Yeah. And suddenly, just as we were about to turn into the gates to the army camp, this bloody little Jack Russell came out of this door, up the front garden path. Yap. The 2 of us dropped our kit bags and we run like scolding cats. And then we sort of gathered our wits. We looked at each other, looked at this scrawny little Jack Russell, and said, and we're going to be dog trainers? So from then onwards, I never met Johnny again. We were in the same class doing dog handlers course, dog trainers course. Then we went down, in my day, you would go through everything. So you'd dog handler, which is 2 weeks, equitation, not equitation, but riders course at the equitation school. So you do your riders course, you go in and watch the farriers put a shoe on and take a shoe off. You go into the saddler's shop, watch the saddlers stitch a few bits and pieces together. You'd then go into the veterinary hospital and you'd have 3 horses to look after. So everybody had 3 horses. Unless, of course, there were more horses than people, then you might have 4, or you might have 2. But in general, it's 3. I loved it. It was my cup of tea. I'm into radiography with the radiographer. I'm in the pharmacy with the pharmacist, the veterinary pharmacist. I'm all over. I'm in the operating theatre, and they must have realised this is what this chap likes, because I certainly didn't choose. I then went down and did a dog trainer's course, which was a short war dog, not a war dog, a guard dog trainer. So the specialist dog trainer is a lot longer, but a guard dog, security guard dog trainer is quite short. I went back to the veterinary hospital. I hadn't been there very long when I was sent to the Royal Army Service Corps pack transport, and they normally use mules, but you can't get mules in Great Britain, so they use horses, and they're dual role. So they're 1 minute they're riding them, the next minute they're carrying kit. And they go out, all the horses in the army have 2 weeks off summer camp. All the horses have a 2 weeks holiday. And the men go down as well, got to. My tent is to one side, and I was told, I think I was a lance corporal, don't take anything from anybody. You're the veterinary guy down there. It's your responsibility. I'm a lance corporal. I was speaking to the vets recently up at Knightsbridge. Where was the veterinary officer? I said, we didn't have one. And we really didn't. So I'm out at summer camp. Can you ride? I said, of course I can ride. Silly question to ask a vet. Well, you can come out for the day with us. And they said, a horse called Bogey. You can take Bogey. Fine. So off we went. All the troop went together. We got out on the Aldershot is full of grassland and open spaces. And the person in control of, I don't know what rank he was, might have been an officer, I've got really no idea. Okay, we'll rest. And you cross your stirrup irons, as we did in those days. And you either get off and have a smoke or sit, whatever. I sat on this horse, and the next day I'm laying on the ground. And everybody's laughing. Everybody's laughing. And I thought, devils, why am I down here? He didn't buck. He didn't rear. So I got back on. A few minutes later, I was on the ground. And everybody's laughing. What I didn't know is that apparently in those days, quite often, horses were lent out to the film people and stuff like that. And you don't know what they're going to be taught to do. They might be taught to stamp in a puddle. Or this particular horse was taught to go down on its front legs. Well, of course, if you ride, you don't. You can sit on a horse and it goes down with its back legs.
Yeah.
And you know it.
Sure.
And I was just rolling off, and of course they thought this was so funny.
And were you, with the RAVC, were you ever deployed, mobilised outside the UK or posted anywhere else?
Yes, I was asked to do the Royal Army Medical Corps stand-in. And I said, I can't do that, I'm not trained. And then this officer came down and he said, are you short of anything? Came out the blue. I was in my tent or doing something, and he said, are you short of anything? I said, no, not really. He said, what have you got? Well, instruments, what equipment have you got? And I opened up this black veterinary box, and there was enough equipment in there for a general to do the most Complicated operation.
Surgery and everything, yeah.
It's all in there. PM kit, and a wartime case that would have gone with a, I'm not going to even touch it. So he said, I'll send you some stuff. He said, when you get back to Melbourne, he said, look, you're on orders. He said, look, you'll be on orders. So he sent these cardboard boxes full of Paracare. So you open it up, appendectomy, and there inside this would be everything you'd need to do appendectomy. But there's plastic syringes. I've still got my glass syringes upstairs. I'd never seen a plastic syringe in my life. I was amazed at this modern technology. I got back to camp. I can't remember whether I got back to Aldershot or Mount Mulberry, but I got back to one of them. And I was sent down to Keogh Barracks to do what they call an RMA's course, a Regimental Medical Assistant, which is like working with humans. Piece of cake, isn't it? Make a bed. Of course, we made bits like that at school. And you know, and it was all the drips and all the rest of it went with it. And I love that. Passed that course.
Yep.
Flying colours. I was then sent down to the small animal house. Mm-hmm. So Jimmy Dargavel wanted to take leave, had to take leave. He was due to leave and he needed to go. And the room was about the size of the Great Hall, only it was a corrugated Wrigley tin. I believe that the front part of it was brick, and then it went up in like a huge, great big tin shed. And we were breeding white mice, guinea pigs, rats, and lop-eared rabbits. The white mice were used for pregnancy tests on humans. Well, the mice weren't on humans. The urine from the suspected pregnant female was brought down to the laboratories above us, and you do the pregnancy test on the white mice. Because in those days, there was no chemical.
Yeah, that was the way you did it.
There was no chemical. That has fallen through. They don't have that now. No. Of course, as you're leaving, the general thing is you put all the males in with the females and you walk away and leave your mate to handle unwanted. And every single pet shop, you've got to get rid of these things.
Yeah.
Because once they're over 21 days old, what are you going to do with them? Mm-hmm. And if you can give them to a pet shop, great. All the food was sterile. Every bit of the food was sterilised before it went in. I was only there for a short while, but it was another facet of the vet life in the veterinary.
Absolutely amazing.
In my day,
yeah, absolutely.
Doesn't exist today.
No. So where did you get deployed to, and where did you sort of get posted to outside of the United Kingdom with the vets?
Only went once to Cyprus. Can't say too much about what happened, except that I took 5 men down there, and we stayed in Dekelia. Very difficult. There was a problem between one side and the other side on the island, and the dog handlers, who are normally Turkish in our case, couldn't get in. So I can only assume, and this is an assumption, that because they couldn't get in, well, this isn't an assumption, the dogs couldn't be exercised. Mm-hmm. So they had to be exercised. We were sent down there to get them out of their kennels, to exercise them, to keep the training going, and then come back to England. So I think it was I'm guessed about 5 weeks. The interesting part there was everybody's waiting in the transit camp to come back to England. The wives, the families, the dogs, the cats, everybody. Well, not dogs and cats because rabies was still on They weren't allowed to. But everybody. I walked out on the airstrip and I saw this kite. And having been in the Air Force, I knew the language and knew my way around things. Walked over and I said, "Is the Q around?" And the quartermaster on an aircraft is the man that does all the stores and looks after it. And he's just got one aircraft. And this chap in overalls, he said, "What's the problem?" And I'm in riding breeches and puttees, I think I was, because that was our dress. So, I might have been in SD trousers, now I think of it. But I was unusual. It wasn't, we dressed.
It was your working dress, which was distinctive because of the role.
Because we didn't wear battle dress. We couldn't wear battle dress. And this chap in overalls, Royal Air Force overalls, no rank up, said, "What's the problem?" I said, "We're looking for a cabbie back to Blighty." He said, "Well, there's no need to see the queue." He said, "I'm the skipper." He said, "I'll tell him. You're okay, you go." He said, "Just be here at 8 o'clock in the morning, tomorrow morning." 36 hours. From Cyprus to Aladdin to Malta, Malta to L'Orange, L'Orange to Lynham. And it was the most wonderful flight in my life. I think the maximum speed for a Beverley is 270 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And I think it's about the same height. So we were playing football in the hold. She was empty. The queue was looking after us. He brought us all these special sandwiches and having a whale of, because he'd never had passengers.
Right. Such a novelty for him.
The five of us sitting in the tailplane. And we got back to Blighty. Somehow or other, we caught the cattle train from Lynham. I suppose we went to Melton. Whether it went to Melton or Leicester, but we got back early hours in the morning on the cattle train.
Amazing.
Totally unorganised.
We are coming towards the end of our time. I'm very keen before we finish to talk to you about the formation of your Jewish identity and what that's meant to you and how it's informed your service and your service has been informed by it.
Dan, I always knew my mother was Jewish. My grandmother had fled from France, having been raped, bearing my mother, and she hid her Jewish heritage, changed her name. It was totally hidden. Wasn't spoken about. We weren't scared to speak about it. It just, every so often it would come up. Oh, that's the Jewishness in you. But it just wasn't a general topic. Maybe if my grandmother was eating something, the two dairy dishes on the same plate, or
Something non-kosher, yeah, sure. Yeah.
it would be brought up. But other than that, it wasn't mentioned. I never mentioned it to my wife, and certainly not to my son. He had no reason to know. I had sympathy, that's probably the wrong word, an underlying friendship with Jewish lads in the services. Knowing my heritage, but not having, I'm going to say come out, but that sounds the wrong word. And Carl went off to my son to, he was going to do a degree for veterinary science, but he, at the age of 16, but was told to come back in 2 years, so he decided to do zoology instead. And he went round the world repatriating animals that have been taken from the wild, and drug barons like to have a big cat with them.
Okay, so all the,
So he was down in
all the trophies and everything.
yeah, he was down in Bolivia repatriating large cats, not big cats, a slight difference. Large cats, pumas, jaguars, and that such like, primates as well. Met this lady. So he was a bit fearful of saying anything to me because he didn't know what my thoughts might be because of the Jewish feelings some people have, anti-Jewish feelings. He had no idea.
So she was Jewish?
As they come. Father and grandfather. In fact, her father won the highest Jewish medal, and her brother, they both won the same medal in the Six-Day War.
Wow.
And she'd served, obviously. So he came home one day and he said, I'm going to get married, Dad. Well, he's old enough not to ask my permission. And I said, oh, that's nice. I said, anybody I know? Living on the Isle of Wight, there are few families I don't know. I might not know the whole family, but I know the family name. If you were a Kennick, then I'd know somebody of the Kennick family. So anybody we know? He said, no, it's a nice Jewish lady. Well, you could have knocked me down with a feather. I was astonished. I put my arms around him and I said, son, you have no idea what this means to me. And then he said he was going to get married in Cyprus. And I said, I can't come. He said, why? I said, Cyprus holds there's something I really can't come. I said, by this time, his mother, my ex-wife, and I were divorced. So we didn't get on. I thought it best if I stay out of the way anyway. But Cyprus held a little bit of...
Held that memory.
Yeah, and I said, I can't come. So Dad, you've got to come. You've got to come. It's part of the ceremony. You've got to be there. So I went ahead of the rest of her brothers and got everything sorted out, organised the hotel so that we were all sitting on one end. Got everything really well organised for the family, for us as a family. And the wedding went ahead. And of course, as you know, I have to be part of the wedding ceremony.
And everything, yeah.
And I got on so well with her brothers. They invited me back to the kibbutz Yugur. And Dan, it was like all my wishes come true. I'm not sure. Are you a kibbutzim?
I stayed on a kibbutz many years ago now, but yes, I worked for a good few months on a kibbutz in the south of Israel.
Well, I don't have to explain it to you, but to the others that are listening, it is something really special, really special. The dining room, for example, I believe Yugur is probably one of the biggest kibbutz.
Right.
And it's an agricultural kibbutz, which...
It felt like coming home for you.
200 head of cattle. It was just cotton fields as far as you could see. But life in a kibbutz was it was wonderful. absolutely wonderful. I didn't want to leave.
I bet.
I didn't want to leave. The arriving there, I was given a house, which you can't pay for, and as you know, and shown round the underground bunkers, which had been used during the 1948 against the British people, and how we, the British, now were sort of wearing both hats, had to break into it. We knew it was there, couldn't find it. Absolutely fantastic trapdoors and mechanisms of getting off, very ingenious. And it's full of weapons that I'm picking up and saying, oh, this is us, da, 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 da. And there were certain buildings there which were from the British period. One particular building opposite the house where I was living, and I said that was the armoury. And a chap that I'm now, I've lost the word, begins with a G.
The guard?
Yeah, one of the guys I'm friendly with. Never mind. We call him Gary. I can't think of his name at the moment. Gary. I said, that was the armoury. No, it's not down on the history. I said, it was the armoury. I guarantee you. I said, look at the way it's built. Look at the construction. And there'd been windows cut in the brickwork at a later stage. It has now been recognised as an armoury, thanks to my daughter-in-law, who would not let it go.
So bring a bit of military archaeology to everything else.
No.
What a wonderful way for everything to come together, from your personal life, your military life, and everything else. Now, the Royal Hospital Chelsea was founded by King Charles II in 1682 as a retreat for veterans, and it opened its doors to the first of the famous Chelsea pensioners 10 years later. It's currently home to around 300 men and women, veterans of the British Army. And Barry, you arrived here in 2018, so 6 years ago now. I wonder if, to finish off today, you can give us just a snapshot of your life here in this incredible facility.
I arrived here after going through a 4-day stay. I'd had a 4-day stay sometime previous to this. Arriving here, I knew what I was coming into. It was so much like school. Perhaps I shouldn't say it, except that we didn't wear scarlet coats. We had uniforms, but we didn't have scarlet coats. The dining hall, everything was so much home. It's not very long when you arrive at the Chelsea Hospital, you befriend someone or are befriended by someone, which doesn't take very long. It's usually the chap that's on the 4-day stay with you. In my case, it wasn't. The cabins were exactly like being on board ship. But, it's yours. What you do in your cabin is not entirely.
So was it still the berths? So when you came here first, it was still the berths rather than the rooms?
The first 4 days, it was the original berths.
Wow.
So slopping out in the morning, if that's for want of a better word, urine bottles down the alleyway. No ensuite.
And would you say now that you're in, there's been a lot of, modernisation, renovation of the facilities since then, and now the pensioners, you have almost like a little sort of studio flat with ensuite and everything else?
Absolutely. And I've got the best palace in the world.
Fantastic.
It's the food is excellent, without any question of doubt at all. The selection of food. Our boarding school was 300, and we never got fed the way we do here. The selection here is unbelievable. And I can remember one chap coming in as a vegetarian, and there was no vegetarian dish at that stage, and they made it for him. They made sure he got what he got. And no, I'm not going to go kosher.
Fair enough.
I think the chef would probably throw a knife at me. No, it is the girls, the waitresses are absolutely wonderful. I don't have to ask. They all know exactly what I'm going to have. They are wonderful. They're singing, humming, not whistling, but they're singing, humming, and coming from a boys' boarding school, coming from a man's life, to hear a female. I'm not used to females at all in my life at all, and so to me that is one of the nicest things that is
the different presences and everything else. I was lucky enough to go on one of the official tours of the hospital over the summer, and I mean everything from the Great Hall, the dining room, to the rest of the facilities and everything. I know that you're extremely well looked after, and it's seems a great place to live.
It certainly is.
Excellent.
And comparing it with the kibbutz, I think it's 51. It's 50-50.
50-50.
Yeah. But it is a wonderful place to be.
Thank you.
And if there are any people out there that would like a tour, I'd be more than willing on a single
fantastic
basis
to take them round.
To take them round as my guide.
Fantastic. Well,
But I do warn you, you won't get dates and times. What you will get is the oddities that other people don't see.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure we might have a few people taking you off on that. Yeah. Before we finish today, I'd like to thank Liam Best, the Senior Communications Manager at the Royal Hospital, for everything he's done to make everything happen today, and really everyone at the RHC for hosting us, especially Barry. Thank you for all your time and insight today. Now, I know you're a keen collector, and especially keen on maps and old maps. So as a thank you today, we've got you this book. It's maps that made history. So they're reproductions, but they're maps, historical maps, that I hope will give you a little bit of entertainment.
How did you know I collect maps?
I'll tell you how I know, because I remember when our friend Brian Bloom, who you know, dropped you off here, I think maybe a few months ago, or I think after, I can't remember what event it was, but I know you invited him back up to the room and you were showing him, I think, your latest purchase, which was a 400-year-old map of the Levant, I believe, if I remember. So I remembered. Yeah.
And the 1948, I've now purchased a 1948 map of Israel.
Oh, right. Fantastic. There you go. So I know it's a particular interest, and I hope that's provides some entertainment and perhaps a few things that you haven't seen before and don't already know. Barry, thank you very much.
And at the meeting at AJEX, please come across, make yourself known.
You'll know Barry, he's in the red coat. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely fascinating.